Good evening, everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in tonight to this information session for the proposed improvements to the Route 117 Main Street, Forbush Mill, Green Road intersection.
Audio.
I'm Randy Heglin. I'm the Public Works Director for the town.
Randy.
Hello. If we could just, everybody could please mute their microphones, that would be appreciated at this time. Again, I'm Randy Heglin. I'm the Director of Public Works for the town. Joining me tonight will be Tom Laughlin and Tyler DeRudier from the engineering firm of the Beta Group. They've been contracted by the town to perform the design services for the project and to assist us in the application for the MassWORKS application. Just give you a little outline of how things are going to proceed this evening in the interest of keeping things moving along. We have a very brief PowerPoint presentation that we'd like to present up front, which will provide some history to the proposed project. When I conclude, the engineers then from Beta will then discuss the potential solutions that we were thinking of for this project and for the improvement of the intersection. We do request, though, that if possible, please refrain from asking questions using your microphone while the presentation is being made. We're hopeful that through the presentation, several answers that may be asked will be answered during that time. We will provide ample time for everybody at the end of the presentation to ask your questions, submit comments, and other questions in general. You may, of course, submit questions using during the presentation using the chat feature on Zoom. And you can also use the Alt-Y feature to raise your hand at the end. And we'll remind you that when the question and answer session opens up. We do request your patience, as the Zoom video conferencing platform can sometimes be cumbersome, especially in a question and answer format. So we appreciate your patience in that regard, and especially for me. It is important to note that the final solution for the improvement of this intersection has not been chosen at this time. Again, has not been chosen. The purpose of this informational session is to make people aware of this project, what we're thinking, and to seek your input and questions on this potential solutions. Again, we're here tonight to seek your questions and your comments. It's an important part of our decision-making process to choose an appropriate solution for the town for this intersection. Jenny is going to be sharing her screen, which is our brief PowerPoint. Now I'll begin. Sure, I'll begin. You can go right to the next slide, Jenny, that'd be great. I think everybody knows.
I just want to see something.
Yep. You can swap.
Randy, are you seeing the side panel, or have I removed the side panel in the view you have?
I'm seeing the main slide plus the next slide.
Okay, so I do need to swap.
Yep.
Hang on one sec. Is that better?
Yep. Nope.
That's the same. It works. Actually, no. For me, it works.
It's still in presenter view, Jenny. If you can do the display settings and swap the two screens.
Yeah, I just did that. Is it correct now?
No, it didn't change.
I'm going to stop the share. Worked in our test beautifully, didn't it?
It did work, yeah.
Did you make Randy the host though, Jenny?
I tried switching. I could not.
No, not yet.
This goes to my statement that, this whole Zoom video conferencing platform can be cumbersome. And I think this is
All right, I think this is going to do it. We're good now, right?
No, it's worse on my end.
So, just kidding. I mean, now.
Try to switch it again.
What's that?
Try to swap the screens again.
I've got it open on my computer, Jenny, if you just want to let me screens,
Not sure why that's not working.
share my screen, and then I'll,
Let me do one more thing.
okay.
Let me just click and drag. So happy that Nikki is live streaming this
That
gaff.
This looks good.
You could see it now?
Yep, looks
Yes.
great.
All right. I don't know what I did, but
I think you're sharing my screen. All right, so I think, why don't we get underway and let's see how the Zoom conference works. I think everybody on the Zoom conference, the Zoom video conference here is aware of the intersection of Main Street and 117, Forbush Mill Road and Green Road, and the issues that have existed there for many years. Just by its geometry alone, it's a challenging intersection. The Green Road comes in at an acute angle, which makes traffic difficult to merge onto 117 to cross Forbush Mill Road. There's some site visibility distances. Also, I think as everybody is aware, traffic volume on Route 117 is pretty heavily traveled for the route that it is. It's in excess, the last traffic count that I saw was greater than 20,000 vehicle trips a day. And at times, I think speed is potentially an issue as well. Complicating this whole intersection is the location of the high school, with the entrance and egress out of the high school, and the conflicts that occur between school and administration arriving at the high school at the same time there are commuters going through. So it just adds to the volume and the congestion and the confusion at the intersections. 117 obviously is a commuter connection for people to meet up with 495, and the pedestrian accommodation is virtually nil at this current intersection. There's no sidewalks, there's no formal crosswalks, there's no other means of protecting any pedestrians coming from, especially the school across the street, to Classic Pizza, or people just walking down Forbush Mill to the soccer field. This project is part of we hope to be a MassWORKS project. MassWORKS is a competitive state grant program which is utilized for public infrastructure. We did have one recently completed successful project. That was the Main Street at Aquatic Hill Road project. That was funded entirely through the MassWORKS program. A preliminary application for this intersection was submitted back in 2020, prior to my arrival in the town. And it was reviewed by the state, and at the time did not make the funding round. So myself and the consultant met with the state reviewers, and we participated in an application debriefing, and we learned ways that we can bolster the application for future application. So earlier this year, we submitted a letter of interest, was submitted to the state, and our formal application is due in early June. That's pretty much the reason for this informational meeting tonight. I think everybody knows what the concerns, issues, and challenges are with that intersection. Public safety for pedestrians and school students crossing the road. Again, as I mentioned, that's virtually nil. Multiple turning movements that occur in a very short area. We have, the roadways, which is the main Forbush, Green, and the school entrances. We have the conflicts with the parking lot and people coming and going to Classic Pizza. We also have, to the further extent of our project, the western end is the entrance and exit out of the post office, which sees a relatively, constant traffic in and out. There's some other businesses in that complex as well, but I think the post office is probably the largest volume of utilizers, people driving to it. The goal of the project is to improve the intersection functionality. Right now, because of all these turning conflicts and everything, it can be dangerous just for vehicles coming in and out of the side roads. I haven't personally witnessed an accident here, but I've heard from many of my employees about accidents that have occurred, some serious accidents that have occurred at this intersection. I think one of them is even one of our employees once that was struck, got in an automobile accident. When this intersection was identified as needing improvements, we said, okay, what are the goals and solutions for this intersection? First of all, I think is to make the intersection safer for pedestrians and vehicles. We need to, improve the intersection functionality, meaning how the intersection works in its entirety, both with vehicular and pedestrian traffic, how things interact at that intersection. There are a couple of different solutions that we have come up with. I've listed 3 of them here. Obviously, the first solution, which isn't really a solution at all, is to do nothing and just let things proceed the way they are. Another possible solution, which is very common, is signalization of the intersection, and that all these projects would include constructions of sidewalks, again, to improve pedestrian safety, and the roundabout solution, which includes, again, construction of safety. And with a roundabout, there's always a concern about how pedestrians maneuver through a roundabout, and it's always a common concern. And the consultants will address that, and it also will be addressed in the design of the actual roundabout. There are some techniques that can be undertaken to provide pedestrian safety in a roundabout construction situation. I'm going to turn it over now to Tom Laughlin at the Beta Group. He's the project manager for this project for us. He's been helping us since the pre-application, last year's application, day one. So I think he's most in key to continue on.
Well, thank you, Randy. So as Randy had discussed, I'm going to go over some of the existing issues out at this location. Many of you are probably even more familiar with them than I am, but I want to make sure that we understand the intersection, and certainly if there are more things that at the end that you can add to this, all the better for us to be able to understand how this operates. One of the key things that we see out here is the size of the pavement areas. The turning movements are very large. We're looking westbound here. You can see Classic Pizza off in the distance. These wider turns, allowing trucks to make those movements, but also allow vehicles, passenger cars, to make the turn at a little bit higher rate of speed. Another contributing factor with these larger pavements and the straighter geometry of this roadway both lead to higher roadway speeds along the length of the road. Jenny, have you wanted next slide? So along, as Randy had mentioned, a number of curb cuts along the roadway. They're almost continuous curb cuts. There's very little edge treatment, vertical curb or slope granite or anything like that designates lane and geometry along the roadway. We have witnessed and we have heard of lots of people traveling eastbound, and someone is waiting to take a left onto Green Road, and or someone is slowed down traveling eastbound, and they'll just kind of almost drive through Classic Pizza's parking lot to make their move to turn right onto Fort Bush Mill Road. So we would like to try to slow those drivers down a little bit, control the way they access the 2 side streets. And next slide, Jenny. As Randy mentioned also, a total lack of accommodation of sidewalks along the roadway. There is no bike accommodation as far as a designated lane. Anyone who would choose to ride a bike out in this area would be riding in the lane with vehicles. That may occur at certain times. I know in a lot of towns, early Saturday and Sunday mornings, there are people that get out very early, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, and bike. But beyond those times, it's rather difficult to be a bicyclist along the roadway. Us putting bike and even segments of sidewalk here is not going to solve the entire problem, but it's going to start to provide for the future where if as the rest of the corridor might be considered, it would provide those links and be able to and construct that infrastructure now. Jenny, next slide. With the lack of sidewalks, we have a crossing here that comes from the school. It is used by kids getting over to Classic Pizza. No crosswalk in the roadway, a difficult crossing. We did meet with the safety officer for the school, told us that there are a number of kids who try to cross here, and it can be difficult for them, and mostly because of the speed of the vehicles coming down 117. And from that, I'm going to have Tyler DeRuiter is going to explain to you the two concepts, the signal and the roundabout, and some of the differences and advantages of each of them.
Hi, thanks very much again. For the record, Tyler DeRuiter with Beta Group. So here you'll see on screen is our traffic signal concept in its current form. And as Randy mentioned earlier, these are all preliminary right now and by no means are set in stone. This concept shows Main Street going left to right across your screen. Green Road is to the north at that skewed angle, and then Forbush Mill is to the south. The pizza shop is in the bottom left-hand corner, and the high school is in the northern side of your screen. This sketch shows shifting Forbush Mill and Green Road to the east, or what I'll call the east for these purposes. The idea here is to align the two of them better so that both of those two roadways can have a green light at the same time. Currently, the two roadways are slightly offset, and the angle that they approach in would not allow that. They would have to go by themselves in order to safely accommodate traffic. In this concept, we're showing a connection of that existing sidewalk that was just shown in Tom's photo, which goes to the high school, would come down along with a nice little grass buffer separating it from the roadway, cross the street to the pizza shop, and then cross over Forbush Mill to an existing asphalt meandering sidewalk that kind of goes through the woods. It's quite nice. Here we've got a fully actuated signal with video detection. So each of the little black rectangles is a video zone where your car would get picked up and send it and request a green light. We've got dedicated left turn lanes for both Main Street approaches. And these would have protected permitted left turn phasing for Main Street. Also shown are some bike lanes along Main Street as well. We're keeping the little right turn bypass lane that you see today to get to Green Road. That is to accommodate truck turns and bus turns that get to the school. However, we're removing the left turn that currently uses that today. With a traffic signal, you cannot do that. They would have to come out to the light and make the left like a normal vehicle would. So that's kind of the gist of that. Randy, would you like to switch to the next? So here's just a quick hit of what we just talked about. So video detection for all approaches, it's fully actuated. We'll provide emergency vehicle preemption equipment for all approaches. So what does that do? That allows the fire truck as it comes through, the traffic signal can see them approaching and it will give a green light to whatever direction they're coming from. And this helps clear out the roadway for the fire truck or the ambulance so that they can get through quicker. Main Street, east and west, will have protected permitted phasing. So that's your solid green arrow and then a flashing yellow arrow, which means permitted. So you can make a left turn, but you have to yield to oncoming traffic. In peak periods, the cycle will switch back and forth as the detection warrants. And then in the off-peak, say overnight, when there's basically no traffic on Green Road or Forbush Mill, it will rest in green for Main Street. So Main Street will see green pretty much all the time unless there's a vehicle detected on either of those side streets. Advantages and some challenges here. So the obvious advantage is it makes it easier and safer for side streets to access Main Street. Currently, there's a stop sign and vehicles have to wait for a gap in the main street traffic. That's where you see some of your conflicts where with the heavy volume, people are kind of jumping out and taking maybe a shorter gap in traffic than they should. This will give them a green light to go and stop all main street traffic in the process. The emergency preemption we talked about, and then an exclusive pedestrian phase. So this would be when you push the button, all approaches stop, the pedestrians get the walk signal, and then they can go. Currently, there are no crosswalks and there is no pedestrian phasing here because there's no traffic signal. The challenges are primarily the alignment. So as Randy mentioned earlier, Green Road comes in at a skewed angle, which makes it really tricky for trucks and buses to make turning maneuvers. We're improving that by shifting the road over, but Green Road still is a skewed angle. So that will continue to be tricky. And then also the opposing left turns on Main Street. So because of the skew, the two left turns to get to Forbush Mill or Green Road would have to cross each other from the left turn lanes. So this means that we can't have those two left turns go together as a protected phase like you might see in other parts of town. The skewed angle as well also increases the length between through the entire intersection. So that generates long clearance times, which is your yellows and your reds. Coupled with that is the speed, which also increases those. So some things that we have to kind of pay attention to as part of the signal design option. Just switch. All right, the second option, or the third, is the roundabout concept. So shown here on screen is the same view as the traffic signal, but now we've got a circle. So Main Street is left to right on your screen. Green Road is up to the north, to the top right, and then Forbush is to the bottom. This design uses a traditional single lane roundabout. So we don't need left turn lanes or anything like that for this concept. However, the vehicle turns to get to Green Road still have to deal with the skewed angle. So we have this red sort of, truck apron thing, just like you'd see around the center of the circle. Cars would go around that, but a larger truck could drive over it if they had to. Given the speeds on Main Street, we have these nice long median islands that will help sort of deflect vehicles as they come along to slow down. With a roundabout like this, you really need to reduce speed significantly, and each approach is a yield. So this provides parity to the intersection. Currently with the stop signs, everybody on the side streets have to wait for a gap in traffic in Main Street. The roundabout will do that naturally. This here provides splitters, so these little deflector islands on each approach. That gives us two things: one, to slow down the vehicles, but also to provide a break for the pedestrian crossing. So if you see, we still have the crosswalks across Main Street to the high school and the pizza shop, and then also across Forbush Mill to the existing walkway through the woods. However, instead of crossing all in one go, now pedestrians can cross one stream of traffic at a time. So they'll cross, the entering traffic, then they can hang out in the island while they wait for a gap in the exiting traffic. Generally makes things a lot safer. However, in comparison, we don't have an exclusive phase where everybody stops for them. We've got nice, big, wide sidewalks around the entire circle. This is to accommodate bicycles and pedestrians. So a bicycle could travel through the circle if they wanted to, or they could jump up onto the wide walkway and cross through the crosswalks. I think that's kind of the basics of this. We can switch. So similar advantages and disadvantages. Advantages, it makes it safer and easier for the side streets to access Main Street. Roundabouts have fewer conflict points than traditional signalized intersections. A traditional four-legged signalized intersection has 32 conflict points. Those are points where a collision could occur. A roundabout has 8, so you're dropping it significantly. Traffic management wise, you're definitely going to slow speeds along Main Street because now everybody has to yield, but your progression will be steady. There's no stop and go. You yield and you kind of progress around the circle. Truck and bus turns are a bit easier with this concept, given the truck aprons. We have a little bit more turning room on the corners, particularly for the left turns, because now they can go all the way around the circle rather than having to cut a really sharp corner coming out of Green Road. And that's really important for the school buses that do that. Your slower speeds around the circle, two-stage pedestrian crossings we talked about, and then off-road bicycle accommodations based on the wide sidewalk. Some challenges are your driveway connections. So given the fact that it's a much wider open concept, connections with the pizza shop and some of the adjacent driveways are things to be considered. There are, based on some traffic modeling, some longer queues in the commuting peak periods, particularly in the evening as you've got all the folks coming home from work. As everybody yields at the roundabout, we don't expect this to be a major issue. Roundabouts tend to recover quite quickly over time. And then the pedestrian crossings are unsignalized. You're not stopping traffic everywhere for those folks to cross. You would like to go to the next one. So Mass DOT actually has a very useful guidebook for the design and planning of roundabouts. And within there, you can access it online. They have a whole list of advantages and disadvantages, very similar to what we just discussed. I'm not going to go through in crazy detail, but it's basically accommodating the non-motorized bicycles and pedestrians, reducing your conflict points in comparison to the traffic signal. You provide parity to the intersection. It's much more useful in the off-peak conditions because you're not sitting on a green light. It's sort of the same way the whole time. And then if you go to the next slide. So these are things: access management, environmental concerns, and traffic calming. Neither of these are really that important for this particular project, but they are definitely here as an option. So things like, noise and, increased cost and things like that. I think that's all we've got here.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. I think we'll open it up now to questions. I do have, there is one question, actually it's from Jenny. So I'll open it up to questions. I'll stop sharing my screen so that we can kind of get a sense of who has questions. If you do have a question, just, do unmute your mic. That would be great. Anybody, is there anybody here who'd like to ask a question or make a comment or anything with regard to this
Sure.
proposed? Mr.
This is
Lauer?
Craig Lauer.
Yep, Mr. Lauer, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if we're planning to pay the cost to do the work, but I'd be interested in knowing how much each one costs, whether it's paid from my own pocket directly through the town or through my own pocket through the state's grants. Still money. Also, I assume the cost for keeping those lights working is going to be non-trivial. What else is there? I'm a little concerned about the length of the left turn lanes for the signalized intersection. If you run into a pile of cars going into Green Road at, say, morning rush hour, I imagine it could block up the way to get to the straight through lanes. That is, the straight through lanes could be impacted. If there's a queue of 2 or 3 school buses, a couple of cars wanting to go that way, you're now stalling 117 traffic considerably. What else? I assume that any pedestrian crossings will have probably switchable flashing lights, and they're supposed to get priority anyway, pedestrians in a pedestrian crossing. Not that you can necessarily do anything about that when you're going 50 miles an hour, but certainly near a rotary, I assume that would be much more accommodatable by the vehicular traffic. I think that's about all I had.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Lauer. Tom?
Yeah, why don't I start with a cost? So we don't have a fixed cost on the two options to date. We do believe they'll be approximately the same cost. I will tell you that the prior grant, and well, why don't we start first about the source of money? So the source would be state funded through the MassWORKS grant. It is, taxpayer money, all of its money, whether it's, state, local, federal, we all pay for it. The grants are based on safety needs and infrastructure improvements. As a small community, less than 7,000, you are eligible for $1 million per year. A highly competitive program, and that was one of the reasons why the project was not selected in 2020, but with the input that they gave us, we feel that we have made the program certainly stronger, and we're waiting for some additional input through the expression of interest that Randy mentioned was submitted by the town. I will say the Wattaquatic Hill Road intersection construction costs were around $650,000. This location, I am estimating, would be less because there was a lot of other work done as part of that project. There was a long length of Wattaquatic Hill Road that was also improved, both paved, new sidewalk, the original equipment, both the detectors and the emitters for the Opticom, the preemption system was installed as part of that. And there was a decent length of paving along 117 as well. So that, I think we would be somewhere in that range, maybe a little bit less, but again, you are eligible for $1 million, and that includes the design, the construction, and the construction oversight. So that is the goal here, to keep it below that grant amount so that it does not include local money. But again, you are right, it is taxpayer money. The cost of electricity on these signals is actually pretty negligible. They all run on LEDs. Some of the older systems used to be, I won't say expensive, but certainly drew a lot more electricity. The newer systems just don't have that load because of the way the system works with the LEDs. I'm going to have Tyler address some of the left-hand cues and the optionality that we had. And we included the left-hand pockets to kind of get that driver out of the way so that there could be bypass, because we noticed that occurs out there. But in an operational part, it's not actually required in the modeling we do, but it's more included as a safety feature. But Tyler, why don't you address that a little bit?
Yeah, I would say it's more likely, given the traffic volumes that you see today on Main Street, that the left turn lane would be blocked rather than the left turn lane blocking the through vehicles. That like Tom was saying, the left turn lane is really there to get some of the left turns out of the way so that your through cars can go around them in a safe manner. The model that we have shows that in one of the peak periods with the school, the left turn lane queue could get long, especially with the buses, but we don't foresee that being a massive impact here. And then your other question was the pedestrian crossings with the flashing lights. So with a traditional signal, you wouldn't have the flashing crosswalk lights because the signal would do that on its own. With a roundabout, you definitely could provide those flashing crosswalk lights if the approach had very high speed and high volume. I think in this case, because the roundabout would be a new configuration that would slow speed down quite considerably, that they wouldn't be needed, but it is something that we could consider in the future. As part of the roundabout, you would have the crosswalk signage, the diamond sign with the guy on it at a minimum anyways.
And I think you had one more question, and I'm sorry, I did not catch the last one.
I just I just had just those four. I thought.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think that's all I
Okay.
had.
Are you okay, Mr.
Okay.
Lauer? Thank you.
Yep. Thank you for
Just
your
to give everybody an update, right now I've got Mary, Krista Mears, Mr. Ross, and an Amy Cohen in the queue for comments. So just if I don't call on you, remind me. But those are the four people so far that I see that have either their hands raised or submitted through the chat. Again, you do the Alt Y if you want to toggle. I'll call on Mary. She was the next person I noticed. Go ahead, Mary.
Hi, thanks. Mary Schumo, Corn Road. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Speed limit is 45 in that area. So how will there be a reduction in the speed limit, or is there just going to be warning, caution signs approaching either the lighted intersection or the roundabout?
We will not be changing the speed regulation, meaning changing the posted speed.
Yeah.
That is set by MassDOT, and but we will. And maybe if we could go back to one of the pictures of the roundabout in the slide presentation, I can have Tyler explain to you how we use the deflector islands in order to slow down the speeds of the vehicles before they enter into the roundabout. So I believe this roundabout we're designing this to get down to 25 miles an hour as we travel through it in that range. Tyler, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. So in either case, whether we do the traffic signal or the modern roundabout, we would provide advanced warning signage, as this is a brand new configuration. So you want to alert drivers that there is a new traffic pattern ahead. Those signs typically get removed some 6 months to a year after it's been installed and people become accustomed to it. I think for the roundabout, you would see definitely, the circular warning, roundabout ahead signs to let people know that they need to slow down. Also, as Tom mentioned, we have those nice long deflector islands for Main Street that help narrow the road a bit and slow the cars down as they have to kind of weave around this very kind of flat chicane type treatment as they come into the yield condition. So there will be things, a lot of what we're doing in the design is taking into account the speed.
So on the splitter islands, will they be raised, or are they going to be flat with the roadway and just painted?
You get better speed reduction if they are raised. So that is the goal today. But again, nothing set in stone.
And just one more point, and I will say for the roundabouts with pedestrians crossing, they only have to deal with traffic in one direction at a time, rather than crossing two directions at a time with a regular set of lights. So I like that idea. So I have heard objections to roundabouts, and I will say, looking at the numbers in the United States compared to France or the UK, we have about 7,000 roundabouts in our country. France has 30,000. The United Kingdom has 25,000. It's a new concept, and I think people are just intimidated by them. And I think that's something we have to overcome. But one of the things I hear are the truck aprons, that what people have observed is that cars use them to sort of speed to go faster. And I don't know if this is a criticism that you've heard before, is that the truck aprons are abused by the people driving in cars.
Sure. Yeah, that was a concern that was brought up when we were actually out in the field doing some observations. One of the folks we talked to had referenced one in another town. That totally has to do with how the apron is constructed. So if you have an apron that's flush and there's no, raised treatment or anything, then yeah, it's a little bit more enticing for cars to cheat onto it a little bit. In this case, we would want to raise those and make it undesirable for a traditional, car to drive over. but a trailer truck or a single unit truck could still drive over and not be impacted because their wheels are much bigger, right? So that is the goal for this project, is to
We
raise.
would also plan to maybe change the material type so that it has a texture, almost a rumble pattern to it, so that a driver in a passenger car, that would not be a desirable, way to travel across it. Now, many drivers, or some drivers, let's say, certainly try to find shortcuts and tricks to everything, it's difficult to control that. I would also, Mary, you make some good points about the use of modern roundabouts in the United States. Certainly in other countries, they're used extensively. Other parts of our country, they're used extensively in Maryland, Texas, different locations, and they're becoming more popular in Massachusetts. There are a couple that are near you, actually, that I'm sure many of you are aware of. There's one at Route 70 and Route 2 up in Lancaster. There's a new one over in the center of Hudson. Two very different types of settings, one being downtown Hudson, lots of pedestrian activity, had I'm not going to call that a modern roundabout or what was there before, but certainly a circle pattern that was there. So maybe a little more, people got used to that one a little bit faster. But what I would suggest is that if you want to understand these better, I think it's important to go up and understand them as a user, but not only as a driver, but as a pedestrian, and to go up and experience it for yourself. In my experience, I have found that probably the two most difficult things to accept in a community that doesn't have either are a roundabout and a dedicated bike lane or a bike path. Those two things are very hard for people to understand and to recognize how beneficial they are and how they work. So you have opportunities near you. I would really suggest that you get out and try to experience those. The comfort level of crossing a roundabout is not going to be the same thing for everybody. Some people may feel crossing at a signal, it's an annoyance to push the button and have to wait. And other people they really enjoy that protection and that, the assistance they get from the signal. So there's a lot of personal experience in both of these that we'd want you to experience, and I think you have the opportunity. Certainly you all know signals and you've, witnessed those, but I think the roundabouts would be a good field trip in a sense to go up and drive it and try to walk through it.
Thank you.
Just an additional couple questions or comments. Back to Mary's first question about the speed limit. What would be involved if we made a decision to request a reduction in the speed limit for this zone?
Yeah. So currently in Massachusetts, speed limits are set on a kind of crazy way where they look at the 85th percentile of speeds. So they take that speed driven by that group of people and say, well, that is what drivers are comfortable at. So that will be the speed limit. Typically what happens if you go out and what they call speed zone an area, especially if you feel that speeds are higher, you will get a result most cases that is actually higher, and the state isn't forced, but they certainly would want to try to adjust that speed higher. So it's not a suggested thing that we tell towns to do. We would suggest that we use other measures to try to reduce the speed. A roundabout is one of those that could help. Changing the lane assignments, sometimes the markings on the roadway can help if you narrow the lanes. I think you have a pretty wide lane out there now, 13, 14 feet, no shoulder. As you pass through on the Wattaquatic Hill, those lanes are 11 foot. And I have noticed some reduction in speed through there. But then it changes again as you leave that, and especially going eastbound to 495, the lane just opens up again in width. So Uh, MassDOT is considering what they call targeted speeds, where you would design a road to target a speed, the speed limit you want, but they haven't had those discussions in the context of roadways that are already speed zoned. So I'm not sure where they're going with that in the bigger general sense, but it's a tricky thing, and it's a well-known issue in Massachusetts of the difficulty of adjusting these speed limits.
Okay, thank you. And I think the other thing too that I think everybody needs to be aware of with a roundabout and pedestrians utilizing the roundabout is there can be an uncomfort level with people with disabilities. With a signalized intersection, they can hit a button and get all traffic to stop for them. Whereas with a roundabout, there's some they're never quite sure, especially with people who are visually impaired, things like that. I don't know if Tyler, if you want to comment on any kind of controls that could be implemented. I mean, it was mentioned the rapid flashing beacons. I don't know if you want to comment any further or.
I was just going to expand and say, when we had shown the two tables from the Mass DOT guidebook, that is one of the concerns that's listed for pedestrian crossings for a roundabout is while yes, you can cross one approach at a time, for folks with disabilities that maybe can't see and they're relying on sound, with the circulation of traffic around the circle, it makes it difficult for them to determine where the traffic is going and whether or not they can cross or not. So that is definitely a concern for that type of intersection treatment. There's other things you could do, such as a rapid flashing beacon. We've had audible detectors that we've installed on some that will say, lights are flashing, but that doesn't necessarily stop vehicles, right? So you're not 100% solving that issue. You're just kind of making it a little bit
But
easier.
it does provide a little bit more level of comfort, I think, for the pedestrian crossing. If there is a flashing beacon,
Right.
a driver will more likely see a flashing beacon than a person on a poorly lit road or something like that trying to
Sure.
cross. Okay, all right. We'll go now to Chris Tamers. You're the next person to have your hand up for your question. You're
Hi.
unmute. Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Two observations. One is what I call the sidewalks and bike lanes to nowhere. Often you do a project like this and you do a sidewalk and it just stops. And same thing with the bike lanes is that you'll extend the bike lanes for 50, 100 yards. But if the bike lanes don't continue down the road for a while, we haven't solved the problem of bikes back in the traffic. So I realize that's probably out of the scope of this project, but adding bike lanes and sidewalks in the immediate area often does not really fix the problem if they don't go anywhere. We have a couple examples in downtown. Even the Water Aquatic project has a couple pieces of sidewalk. Same thing with the Public Safety Center. They just don't go anywhere. Anyway, my main point that I'm concerned about with the roundabout, which I'm intrigued by, and being in native New Jersey, we have traffic circles everywhere. So not a new concept for me. Is the close in proximity of the westbound traffic on 117 entering the roundabout and the folks who are in the roundabout who need to exit onto Green Road. If you recall from the diagram, those two are very, very close together. People on 117 who are trying to travel westbound are going to be very impatient, want to get into the roundabout, keep moving. I'm very concerned that there's going to be a number of accidents potentially as people in the roundabout try to get to Green Road and are clipped by people trying to enter the roundabout. Does that make sense?
It does. Hopefully you all can see my screen. I think what the gentleman is talking about is the potential interaction between cars heading west on 117. Correct me if I'm wrong. Heading west on 117 and their interaction with people coming around the roundabout to go up Green Road.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. I'm really concerned that folks are going to come up to the intersection. These are people 117 westbound, come up into the roundabout and are going to be anxious to enter the roundabout and could potentially squeeze folks who are trying to, in essence, head almost in their direction, right?
Got it.
It's kind of you talk about that acute angle. It's a kind of a funky, not quite right turn. And they're going to be squeezed by cars trying to enter into the roundabout from 117 westbound. Just that just looks bad to me. I don't know how you fix it. But
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, Tyler, I don't know if you have a comment or anything or any thoughts initially. I mean, obviously these plans here are very preliminary. These are conceptual at best. So, I mean, I think personally, I think that's a valid point. You know, I get the same feeling into the Route 2 rotary heading west on Route 2 at the Concord Rotary. I get that same feeling where people are trying to go. You know, if you're heading west Route 2 and you're going around the rotary and your cars that want to take that first leg off of the rotary, it's a real tight situation. But I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah, I would say that the sight distance should be pretty good there. One of the reasons why we're showing the yield line, which is, it's kind of hard to make out what the yield line is there, but one of the reasons why we're showing it as far up as we are is to Mary's point before, of trying to get cars to not drive over the truck apron. So currently right now there's a big wide open swath of pavement where people cut that corner with a little slip lane type thing that's out there under existing. So what we want to do is not sort of entice people to do that. So if we bring that yield condition way up, now a car pulls up and has to stop and almost make a complete right turn to make that move rather than a quick, right. So yeah, it's definitely something to consider for sure.
Okay.
thank you.
All
Chris,
right.
on your comment about the bike and ped to nowhere, in a sense, what we're showing here tonight is accommodating a footprint that would allow for bike and ped accommodation. At Wattaquatic, there are sidewalks that extend along some lengths. Some of them appear to go nowhere. However, the town is a designated complete streets community, and with that, they have over, I think, between 15 and 20 different projects that have been prioritized for complete streets, bicycle and ped accommodations. And there are multiple projects that connect to that intersection that can hopefully get funded in the future and extend those lengths. As far as the bike lane goes, what we would like to do at this location is include enough width on the roadway to allow for accommodation designation at a later date, but we would not mark the lane currently as just the single intersection was completed. Marking that lane as a designated bike lane would wait until the rest of 117 came up with a concept on how that would happen. And I believe there was a comment from the Board of Selectmen's meeting that was well directed regarding planning and how it seemed like we were doing this in kind of spot locations, fixing these elements one at a time rather than kind of planning. What the town's trying to do is make themselves accessible to the money that's available, and to go after opportunities that allow them to get the improvements they need. There is consideration of doing a larger study. There's actually been two smaller studies. One was done by a town committee Another was done by MassDOT when there was a consideration of MassDOT taking 117. So we are in line with a lot of the recommendations and the understandings that those reports put out. And what we're trying to do is just not build something that can't be accommodated later on. Whether we build all the sidewalk connections, whether we build all these different elements, we want to make sure we have the right of way, that the utilities are not in the way, and provide for the future. And not do this where we build something and then realize, oh gee, wish we had thought about that type of thing. So.
All right, thank you. Mr. Ross, you had a question or a comment? You're gonna have to unmute your microphone.
Yes, thank you for. I've got several questions. I don't know whether to put them all together into one or do them separately. I noticed that the whole presentation didn't take much account of other traffic in the area, particularly the other school entrance. And I've never been early enough in the morning to see what kind of volume the school buses from the Lancaster area provide. But I'm quite well aware of the westbound activity left of what would be the circle or the signalized. In the traffic roundabout situation, I see it very difficult for a westbound vehicle to turn left, first of all, into Classic Pizza, secondly, into the real estate office, and third, perhaps into the post office. So I think when you're planning the width of the road outside of those businesses, you ought to consider a left turn lane, like they've got in Stowe Lower Village, for example. That's a major problem, trying to integrate the commercial traffic with the school activities. My next point, okay, you've got the slide on the screen now. You've got a divided highway all the way down on the westbound side with the green. How does a westbound car get into the real estate office or maybe into the post office? Not sure how far left that goes, far west. So they can't get over the divided line. As far as Classic Pizza is concerned, if you've got a westbound car, they can go around the traffic circle and sort of sneak into the Forbush Mill Road entrance to Classic Pizza. Nice to see Classic Pizza cleaned up a lot, the entrance there. I remember way back when they were something in front of the planning board, must be 25, 30 years ago. We were supposed to put something in there to stop eastbound traffic cutting through the Classic Pizza parking lot to get into Forbush Mill Road. But right now the parking is working out into that pavement area. So a little bit concerned with that westbound side of either of them. Suggestion maybe on the traffic, on the crosswalks that you've got there just west of the roundabout. A good thing that works in England particularly, and you can guess that 50 years ago that's where I came from, they offset the crosswalks, so that you basically can't run through both of them. You've got to make pedestrians stop in the middle, cope with the offset, which is often fenced, and then treat the other crosswalk on the other side as a completely separate transaction. That works very well. Going back to my experience of England again, they found the volume going through some of their traffic circles, of which there are thousands, is so high. And going to Krista Mear's point about being squeezed out, if you're trying to make a left turn into Green Road, same thing goes on with the Concord Rotary. But it seems to work okay. I've got a lot of experience of that. But in England, they've started to put traffic lights up at circles, roundabouts. I think that's their way of dealing with the volume. So one of my concerns overall is there's a very high volume of commuter traffic through here. And I'm wondering if the the roundabout can handle that level of volume on a cars per hour or cars per minute basis that they're approaching. 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the afternoon is bad westbound, and Corby from 5:30 till 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning is bad eastbound, very high volumes. The next concern I had, or the next question, sorry for putting them all together here. Don't think it happens very often, but a bicycle is going eastbound past the school and approaches the traffic circle or the roundabout. That's one hell of a transaction to try and make to turn left up Green Road. You're trying to keep on your white bike paths there, perhaps. Then you've got to cut across other traffic that's eastbound in the roundabout. If you had another crosswalk on the east side of the roundabout, then that's right. Then the bicycle traffic, I think, little as it might be, would be quite happy and much safer to use the crosswalk rather than try to make it while still mounted on the bicycle. I mentioned earlier when I started about the taking into account the traffic that comes out of the other school entrance. I haven't heard anything, not in any town committees now, to know what kind of business is going in behind the liquor store there and whether that's been taken into account. I don't know whether that's going to be truck traffic or car traffic or whatever, but it looks like something is happening there. So that's my 2 cents worth. I'm not sure which one I would prefer, the signalized. Every time I go to the dump, I go down Green Road and cross into Forbridge Mill. Every time I walk to the post office, right now it's a hell of a problem. So I live just up on the Green Road side of things, so I've got a lot of experience. So say thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. I think you had some valuable insight. I was very much interested in your comment that in the UK, they're actually adding traffic control lights because the volumes have got to a point. I was going to mention this at the very end too. I mean, I was involved in another community, my previous community, and that community chose a roundabout, and there was awful lot of discussion about how pedestrians and everything were going to interact. Pedestrians and vehicles were going to interact. It was on a route that walkers to school use. There was an elementary school and a high school, so there was a lot. It was downtown. It was a lot of traffic, and we actually came across a couple of different videos, and I'll post it on the Public Works page. There are YouTube videos. One is a community in the UK. It's kind of a long, lengthy YouTube video, but it shows the pre and post roundabout constructions and how the interaction between each of the people who utilize the roundabout worked together, how the things worked, how the roundabout worked. And it was the other one I'll try and post if I get the link, was a YouTube video that we developed strictly for our community. Right at the time, it was a 5-way. It is a 5-way intersection, and it wasn't functioning well at all. It was signalized, and we were looking at options of way of improving the intersection. It was also included a dog leg, and the lights weren't phased together, so the traffic was backing up in town, and things just weren't moving. And we developed a special video just for that, just to show the interaction with the pedestrians and existing traffic with the roundabout. And we actually utilized actual traffic counts in both scenarios. So the animation that was done was utilizing actual traffic counts in existing conditions, and then existing traffic counts with a roundabout situation. It's a little bit different because we added a bypass road as well. So, but you get a sense on how the traffic systems work together, I think. I think I'll turn, over to Tom and Tyler if they had any comments with regard. I see your point of the location of the crosswalks. And as we were just looking at this concept plan, I noticed there's like a sidewalk to nowhere here with no crossing to get over to the sidewalk on the east end of the roundabout. It comes up, there's a crosswalk here, it comes across, there's a sidewalk, and then, maybe just, again, this is a concept plan, and as designs get flushed out, it get vetted further. I think that's important. We'll pay attention to things like that, and appreciate your comments. Tyler or Tom, you have anything
Yeah,
further?
why don't I take a couple of them and Tyler can take some others. We regarding the school entrances, we have been out there during the release of the school buses, and we have talked with the school department about the way they arrive, how they are released. There is an officer, as you may or may not know if you're a local resident, that kind of directs traffic there on the release, pulls all the buses out at the same time. And both of these situations, that officer would need to kind of learn a little bit different about the process here. The roundabout certainly would allow those buses to come right out and process right through. Whereas the signal, if the signal were red as they were releasing, the person would need to recognize that and maybe hold a few buses for a moment so that they don't block up Route 117. Your comments about access are right on. There are some techniques where we could maybe include a break in some of these splitter islands, reduce the instead of raised, go to painted. But there are trade-offs in the sense of how traffic behind that vehicle and the distance away from the circle, how that all reacts. Whether we share some driveways within the town layout that would provide access to the businesses in a slightly different way than it is today. I think you can kind of see on the let's see, the southwest quadrant where Classic Pizza is. There's kind of a line that shapes both Forbush Mill Road and parallels 117. That's actually the layout line for Route 117. So there is more town layout available in that area where we could provide for driveway access and things like that. Department to look at whatever might be headed there. And then the last thing on the what appears to be the sidewalks to nowhere, those are really there to accommodate the bicyclist. Not all bicyclists are comfortable traveling through a roundabout. So that type of path provides, as you see traveling westbound or eastbound, you'll see some bike designations that are there to only right now to show how this would work in the future if we were to get a bike lane along 117 or some type of bike accommodation along 117. This is the way in which a bicyclist with less comfort level would kind of access this pathway and be able to either walk or ride along those lighter gray sidewalk areas, cross the different approaches in the circle, and then put themselves back onto Route 117 along a straighter section of the roadway. So that's what those are for. If a pedestrian were walking in the shoulder on the grass, they certainly could have the option of using that as well. But I don't see many walkers along that length. Let's say between here and the library, there's not a lot of people, except in the areas where there are a few segments of sidewalk. There aren't a lot of people walking along the roadway in that section.
Because it's so dangerous.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's what we're trying to do here. Provide some future accommodation that can allow people. It's a nice stretch of the road. But it's not really accessible to anyone, walking, or even biking for that matter. I certainly wouldn't bike along that section. So, Tyler, maybe you could address some of the volume issues and the crosswalk styles and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I'll just add to your point. The current idea for this circle is to provide the same pedestrian accommodation as the traffic signal concept, where we would meet the existing sidewalk that goes through the woods to the bottom right of your screen, wrap across Forbush Mill, come up along the pizza shop, and then cross to get to the high school where there's the existing sort of sidewalk that we showed in a picture at the beginning. The remainder of the paths around the circle, as Tom said, is really for the bicyclists. So getting those with less comfort to get up off the roadway on a path and cross. If you notice the green road leg, there's the island actually goes from raised to like a mountable type surface where there's the red. The crosswalk actually has to go behind that in order to safely accommodate them. So those pedestrians, or well, really bicyclists, would cross in one movement, right? And then they could travel back down and get back on the road to the west of the circle in a bike lane or whatever treatment we decide as part of the future of the corridor. In terms of, what were we talking about? That we did do some traffic counts for 12 hours before COVID. And we found roughly 0 pedestrians and bicycles in this entire area. Like we counted both school driveways and the intersection here of Forbush and Green. So, you know, under existing conditions, like y'all have mentioned, the amount of pedestrian and bike activity is pretty small. And that could be from a number of factors. So here we're trying to accommodate the movements that we believe would be the busiest. So getting to and from the school and the pizza shop, and some of those uses like the post office on the southern side, and then to that trail that exists to the southeast. Could we install a sidewalk or a crosswalk on the eastern leg of Main Street? Yes. We don't have one now just because it would be so far away from the yield condition. And with that bulbed out truck apron along the skewed corner of Green, we felt that a crosswalk there would be a little awkward. But again, you know, these are concept level. So if it was there was a desire there, we could build one in. What else did you have? Volume through the circles are high with the signals. I don't think if we were designing a roundabout here that would need a signal, we're doing it wrong. So that's not the goal at all. The goal is to accommodate all of the traffic with the circle. We've done traffic analyses and it shows that with a single lane roundabout, you can accommodate the volumes that we've grown up to the year 2030. So we've accounted for growth in the region, and we found that the single lane circle will work. Eastbound bicycles crossing over to Green Road. Under this configuration here, what we would expect them to do is to get off of the roadway at the ramp that Tom noted near the pizza shop. And then they would cross the crosswalk on the west side of the circle and then continue along the pathway on the northern side of the circle. And that's how they would access Green Road. So they wouldn't actually cross Forbush Mill. They would cross before then, if that makes sense.
I think that's a pretty rare occurrence. I have seen school children cycling along Main Street going home from school. But it's very rare to see kids on bikes on Main Street. There's a lot of recreational cycling that goes on. And on Sunday mornings, Saturday mornings perhaps as well, it's very common to see them using the high school parking lot as a collecting point. But they're all adults, go off in a convoy, and they're pretty careful as they cross the street.
Okay.
I really applaud you taking out the left turn lane for people coming out of the Green Road entrance out of the school. A lot of them take that left turn to get across traffic and go eastbound. We have to remember somewhat that being a regional school, a third of the traffic comes from Stowe and a third of the traffic comes from Lancaster. So there's school in and out time, and other times in the day there's school traffic from both directions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ross.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next person I had on the list who raised their hand next was Amy Cohen. If you want to unmute your mic, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you very much. My question is more about whether you could speak to the timeline for when this project might occur if we were to get the grant, and how the decision is made. I sit on the school committee and the school building committee, and we're currently in the middle of a process with the MSBA to look at options for improving the high school, or making a new high school. And so I'm interested in how the two of those impact each other.
So we did meet with the school, and I believe the superintendent, and I'm not sure, I think he's a superintendent at that school, but because it's a regional school, I'm not sure if I'm using the right term, if he's just a principal. He informed us that you were in that process of looking at the feasibility of a new school and what it might look like. We discussed how traffic might change if that happened, and he did not feel it would change. So we were pretty confident in looking at things in the way that we have. As far as the process goes for MassWORKS, this year's schedule has been moved forward a little bit, and I think they've done that because in prior years they used to announce somewhere around October, somewhere around election time. There used to be a common time to announce, and other times it would go as far as Thanksgiving. But all of those kind of put people into a real rush to get together a spring construction job. So they have kind of brought that timeline forward. As Randy said, the deadline for submission is June 4th this year. They plan to make awards in early fall, which would allow the design to continue. With an early decision, we would be able to put together a design package in the winter, award a contract for the spring, and be able to move forward. I would say that we would allow for a year to construct this, but that in good conditions, we would not need a year to construct this. We moved pretty quickly. I think we finished the Wattaquatic intersection, I think it was either 4 months or 5 months early, based on the schedule that we had presented. The contractor wanted to come in and get it done. He makes more money if more efficient they are. I'm sure that we would follow the same type of process here, where we would try to get it all done in a single construction season, but there may be some smaller elements that have to extend, a ways.
All right, thank you. Thank you. The next person I had is Mike Ayotte, and just to let you know, Tom and Sue Starr have submitted a couple comments. Let them know that I've seen them, and we'll get to them after Mr. Ayotte.
Okay.
Mr. Ayotte?
How you doing there? Thank you for having this session and stuff. I sat on the previous committee, I think with Mary also, that kind of looked at this intersection. So, and kind of, we put this as our first intersection to be looked at, and possibly something done with it. Something has to be done one way or the other with this intersection. I see too much going on. It's the reason why I put my daughter in an F-350, driving only a mile to the high school instead of walking, because you can't safely go down Main Street and get down there. So I appreciate you doing it. I do think that eastbound, having a crosswalk or something to cross there might be a good idea. One of the things that they've done, also a new user of the upgraded Kelly Square, can't call it a roundabout really, we'll call it an oval about, using it every day getting to Polar Park. I have to say, I didn't think Kelly Square could be fixed. Kelly Square could be fixed. If Kelly Square can be fixed, this can be fixed for sure. Because anyone who previously drove through Kelly Square would be amazed at what it is now. And I cross the traffic there. I feel like I'm not going to die. I used to go to the Dunkin' Donuts. I go over and get food. I walk safely through all those, all these type of little cut through crosswalk island things, and cars are, just as much traffic is going through there as we have, at least. So I truly think that the roundabout will work. I'd like to know if the roundabout has any preferential treatment around. You said there was no environmentals here, but I feel like a roundabout would be environmentally more friendly for a few reasons. One is we have a steep grade going uphill. So therefore, if you stop trucks and make them start, which there is a considerable amount of truck traffic on our road, if you stop them and make them start, that's considerably more fuel, more pollution and everything, that if they could just keep moving at, 15, 20 miles an hour and just keep kind of going up the grade, as opposed to getting stopped at a full stop. Plus, is there a environmental benefit? And does MassWORKS look at one versus the others better, like for giving us a chance of getting the money? I mean, do they kind of prefer the roundabout because of that and traffic flow, and it keeps everything moving, versus the traffic light that might stop things and such? So.
Well, first off, I think Kelly Square is a big plus for roundabouts, and showing people how they can be efficient. I think they refer to that one as a peanut shape. You probably know that, but it's certainly not a circle. And as far as some of the issues of the environmental impacts, it would be hard to evaluate. The signal would probably, for a lot of its use, be green on Main Street. So, it's not going to call those side streets unless someone is there waiting. So they, the traffic, the trucks would pass through, pretty efficiently along the way. MassWORKS is looking for the safest and the most accommodating solution. So the fact that you are a complete streets community gets you rank and points in the selection process. The fact that the project would accommodate complete street ideas would also get you points in the process. But because both of the concepts, and we've done this purposely, would accommodate bicyclists and pedestrians better, they would both probably rank pretty similar. They also look at other things, right-of-way impacts, which we have carefully avoided. They typically do not approve projects that need right-of-way process until you've acquired it. And there are no immediate environmental impacts here. We would need to make sure that we check with Bolton Conservation Commission to make sure that we're not inside of any buffer zones or anything else like that. But what MassWORKS is looking for is kind of a hurdle-free, barrier-free project where if they gave you the money, you would be successful in building it. And money is what's holding you back from achieving it. They've given money to other projects. They have sat idle because they can't solve certain problems, and they have begun to avoid those project types to move them on to shovel-ready projects that they can process and keep going. And they wait for the other communities to get those hurdles solved and then come forward with an application. It's been a great program. I
have a couple of follow-ups.
Yep. Go ahead.
I have a couple of follow-ups that came up. One is on a gentleman before mentioned on that westbound lane after maybe widening that so that it's easier to turn in and out. I think that is kind of a good idea for the businesses on the westbound side of the roundabout. I'm looking more at I was thinking more of the roundabout situation. Just to give them a chance to kind of get out of the way. And, you know, it looks like we have some of the room that we might need to do there. We do own the, you know, the regional school district owns the other property. And I think if we can make everything safer, they might be willing to help give a little of that front lawn that probably isn't going to be used for anything to this process, I would hope. The other thing is, I know that we had talked with the previous DPW director, or public safety and stuff, that this area could be some sort of traffic business zone safety area too. I forget what it was exactly called. We may have called it out in our report that you guys have read, or it might have come up after the fact, but it was something that could be applied to this area because of the number of businesses that were lined up in a 45-mile-an-hour area that then qualified it for an automatic kind of speed reduction and situation because of everything that was going on in the business area. So that might be something to look into on the speed side.
Yeah. Regarding the access into the business, certainly something we need to continue to consider and work on. I'm not sure that we would need property from the school to do that, but I think they might be a willing participant if that did arise. Tyler, I believe what Mark is talking about is the changes to the school zoning type regulations that allowed for certain types of districts to be speed zoned differently. Would you be able to address that?
I don't believe I can.
Okay, well, let me address it a little bit then. So there were changes made. So there were always school districts that had to meet criteria in order to get signage put up to identify a school zone, reduce the speed down to 20 miles an hour. And there are different signs that are used when children are present during school hours, when flashing, different things like that. Through this change in the law, there were other areas or other criteria designated that would allow for speed zones to be changed. I'd have to go back and read the law regarding the density of commercial businesses. I'm not sure that is one. But I do know that it did apply to other reaches, such as a cluster of housing, or let's say maybe some elderly housing, or other activities where a park might be present and things like that. So we can check that law and work with Randy to see what might be required to go after it. But that's a good suggestion here if we could meet some type of criteria like that.
And one other comment on streetlights versus roundabout. I have not almost been hit crossing the Kelly Square one, but crossing right in front of the park just 2 days ago, I almost got run down by a car going 45 miles an hour trying to either beat the light or running the red light, and I had the walk signal. So no offense to all the design in the world that you guys do, which is great, but nobody really a lot of times pays attention to those stupid walk signals anyway, especially on a road where there's a bit of speed going on. I found them to be pretty much useless, and drivers will run a red light, and if you're not watching, I almost got clipped. I almost wasn't watching. So that's it. But thank you for doing this, Randy, and welcome on board to Bolton, and nice to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Hyatt. I'm going to go now to the stars that submitted a couple of questions. The first question they submitted, it says, for the traffic light option, would the speed limit on Main Street be reduced? I think that was pretty much addressed in comment that Mary had early, a question that Mary had earlier, and I think Tom has addressed it a couple of times, and it just came up again with Mr. Hyatt, and I think something we need to do some further research in and review the current changes to the law. So I think that was a great discussion we've had this evening. The second question says, if you are considering the post office, you need to consider Goose Pond Road. Also, the speed limit at 110 is reduced to 30 miles an hour prior to the lights. Um, I think, you know, I put the post office in. It's kind of a little bit just beyond the western extent of our project, but I think we need to be cognizant of the traffic that is generated at the post office. And I don't know if Tom wants to mention, we had a discussion, Tom and I, earlier about trying to fit, extending the western extent a little bit to fit within the budget. So, I mean, that's still, as numbers get, you know, fleshed out and the concept plans get refined, we can better define the western limits of it. With regard to the speed limit prior to the lights, you know, I think that's related directly to the lights. I
was just looking at Gooseneck Road is that right near Harvard Road? I'm not,
Goose Pond Road. Gooseneck Road is the subdivision directly behind the highway garage here.
oh, okay. Yep. I wasn't aware of the name of that street, but I'm aware of the location of it. Yeah, that is a little further away from the intersection for both of our solutions. And about the same distance as the post office. And as Randy said, they're both concerns that we want to make sure we're addressing those issues. So still of consideration, especially when we, as Randy said, look at the price and how far along 117 is this project going to extend for.
Okay. Mary, for the second time, you had another question for us?
Yeah, hi. So I want to go back to lowering speed limits because I think, Mark, you were referring to was a couple of years ago, the state sort of passed on to the towns and cities the right to lower speed limits in certain areas. And those areas were a designated safety zone, which you could set the speed limit at 20 miles an hour. And you could also do it in thickly settled areas, reducing the speed limit from 30 to 25 miles an hour. So Bolton did try to contacted the state about lowering the speed limit in the town center, which is a thickly settled area. And it was denied because 117 has set speed limits. And because of that, they will not allow either of these two rules to be used. So if you have a road that already has set regulated speed limits, you can't apply either of these.
Yeah, Mary, you just, I now remember some conversations I had with the prior DPW director and Don Lowe, the town manager, about that. And it was an interpretation, I think, that the town was receiving, that the law actually did allow them to change all speed limits, whereas the law, the intent and the interpretation that the state uses is that areas that have a speed regulation, again in layman's term, that is a posted speed limit, are not eligible to fall within that law. And that is the same law I spoke about earlier, where there are different criterias and districts that allow for the reduction. And we would need to check the density of this location to see if it fit that, but it is a posted roadway, so it's probably not going to be eligible in that sense.
Okay, thank you, Mary. We had a question submitted in the chat from Mr. Lauer again. It says, does the beta group know about the potential development on the corner of Forbush and Main? And my short answer is yes. They've been supplied with the same concept plan that the developer has provided the planning board. So they are aware of it. I don't know if Tom, if you want to comment any further on it or.
Yeah, we've seen it. We feel it probably provides a little more flexibility if it were to go forward and be approved. I think it requires a zoning change, but it has multiple access points that are proposed. One is on Main, one is on Forbush. So it would allow for users to have right turn in, right turn out, or to come in and circle down Bush and take a left and go back westerly on 117 as well. So the plan has a little more flexibility and opportunity, I guess. They have access and frontage on both roadways, so it provides them a little more, opportunity to do it. It is a proposal. It is a process in town. It's going to take some time for that to all happen. I think that the developer being aware of what the town is proposing is also an important consideration here, so that maybe they could adapt to what is happening here as well. But we are aware of it.
And yes, the question is, yes, the developer is aware of that we were looking at some improvements to the intersection. We have not supplied, at the time I spoke to him, we did not have, any real concept plans that we have this evening. But
Okay, great.
We'll be having further discussions with the gentleman. Next hand I see up is Patty DeBello.
Yes.
You want to unmute your mic?
Yes, I'm all unmuted here. Thank you. I just have one quick question. Is there any data out there that says roundabouts deter trailer trucks, coming down the road? So said differently, would they actually look to find an alternate route rather than Route 117?
If you know of something that deters tractor trailer trucks, then you'd be a very rich person.
Maybe it was
Waze and GPS devices and the business of trucking is, it's difficult. These drivers, a lot of these drivers get paid per haul in a sense. So if they're carrying, whatever to, let's say, the landfill in Clinton or whatever they're carrying, they might get paid per trip. So if they can save 5 minutes or 10 minutes per trip, that might allow them to get out of their truck and have a sandwich and still make 5 trips in the day and still make the same amount of money. So they are looking for shortcuts everywhere they can. Excluding trucks is not allowed on a state unnumbered route, Route 117. But certainly if we can slow speeds down a little bit, that could be a detriment where we're no longer, your 117 is no longer the shortcut. They may choose to find another path to get there. But that it's a difficult problem. Trucking's a necessary thing in the society we live in, but adapting to it and living with it is a whole different issue as well.
Okay, thank you. Another question that came in through the chat from Mr. Ayat. It says, would a raised crosswalk up on the east side help to slow the traffic? He said they use those in Kelly Square and maybe rumble strips to alert drivers to slow down. And he said, how about side road truck exclusions? And we should approach that again.
The raised crosswalks on 117 would not be the appropriate location to use that. The speed of the road is designated a little too high to put in that type of device. Kelly Square, certainly more urban setting. Speeds are already lower coming through there, and the peanut-shaped type roundabout further reduces those speeds as they get through those patterns, and helps a lot in that area. Truck exclusions. We did apply and submitted for a truck exclusion on Wattaquatic Hill Road. I think we're still trying for it, but we're looking for some assistance from reps on the issue. Because the Wattaquatic truck exclusion passes through both Berlin and Clinton, we need permission from each of those towns to get it and to exclude. So if a exclusion on Bush Mill or Green Road extended into another town, we would need the permission of that town to exclude traffic on the roadway and to put it onto another roadway, which is typically the problem, that they don't want to see increased trucking on the other roadway. If the road is complete in your town and there is an alternate route, it's an easier process, but it's not a guaranteed process. You know, if there is something in mind here, I think the problem with Forbush is that it heads straight over into Clinton as well. So you would have to deal with Clinton on, you know, to have that discussion. You know, I'm not sure by excluding them on Forbush, where are they going to end up? You know, they might end up in another spot where you don't want them again. We were hopeful that the signal at Wattaquatic would kind of slow them down a little bit or keep them from coming in, but in my visits out in that area, it doesn't seem to be stopping them coming through there.
Okay, thank you. Another question came in through the chat. It's from Holly Lauer. This is, what are the next steps after this session for the town as far as deciding on a design? Tom, is part of the application process, so why don't you go with that too?
Yeah, so from a recommendation that you know, the Board of Selectmen would have a chance to review these plans, recommendation from that board. We would move forward with one of these concepts, put a price to it, you know, put some narrative to it that explains the advantages, disadvantages into the application, and then, you know, wait for the process. As Randy had mentioned, it started off with, we have some very good insight on what our previous application, where our previous application could be improved. And I think the biggest takeaway that I took from it was that the program is extremely competitive, and that what small towns have been doing, other small towns similar to Bolton, is that they are doing a level of pre-engineering that flushes out the issues, and we're able to better describe the project and and garner public support. That is not a requirement of the program, but other communities have decided to do it in order to rank higher and present themselves better. That's what the town was told, and I think the town has taken the right steps to get through this part here, to understand the issues, and to know that there are not barriers and that there is support for safety improvements at the location. So I think that's the biggest thing that you know, can move forward here with a process. And again, the rest of it would be to try to finish a design before the winter, advertise in the winter, award before the spring of 2022, and then have a construction season, hopefully get final paving down for fall of 2022.
All right, thank you. One last comment came in by chat, and I think it just goes back to the truck exclusion. It's from Mark Guyot. It says Route 110 is a longer route, more time, and may discourage. And I think that just a comment with regard to the truck exclusion. All right.
That we looked at 110. It's about I think it's about 6.5 minutes longer. Certainly not going to change anyone's life by having to drive that length. And then the other route that we looked at for Wattaquatic was the trucks staying on Route 495, traveling down to Route 62, and traveling in along 62 through Berlin and into Clinton. And that route also was only 5 minutes longer. But because it took coordination with both communities, we weren't successful in getting there.
Okay. I'm going to just put it out there one last time. If anybody has any further comments or questions or anything at all they'd like to add, very much appreciate everybody taking the time this evening on a rainy night. I see Mary went to a more comfortable chair, so she has the right idea. if anybody has any further comments or questions or whatever, even if you think of something later, there's a link on the website on the Public Works page. It's called service requests. You can submit a question through there, and we'll take that in as well, and be part of my package. What I'm planning on doing too is I was taking some notes of the questions, various questions that were asked tonight, and I want to try and I don't want to say summarize them, but at least list them out for the select, that we can present them to the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator, and make them aware of what the thoughts are of the people, where their heads were going with asking questions, and kind of get a sense and a direction of interest from the public, and to provide some additional information to the board as we make our presentation to them, and hopefully move forward with this application. And of course, if once we submit the application, if it isn't funded, I think this has been a valuable process we've done this evening, and it will bring us even further along if we decide to try again at a future application date. But I think this has been very helpful. And again, I thank everybody for participating tonight. Just one last thing, does anybody have any questions? No, I think we got it. On behalf of Tom and Tyler, I just want to say thank you to everybody, and appreciate everybody's input. All right.